Morning, everyone. Welcome to our podcast, The Meaning of Life, where philosophy gets personal. Today, we are very happy to host our interview with Professor Michael Stanton. He's a clinical health psychology and assistant professor at California State University's Bay. His profile is incredibly interesting because he has worked with addiction, in particular food addiction. He integrates mindfulness with cognitive behavioral therapy to treat both mental and physical health problems. Dr. Stanton is also a guest contributor to several Bay Area TV news stations, and he generally brings in his psychological expertise to the analysis of current events. And now, for example, he's working on the effects of coronavirus and the relation between coronavirus and stress. So today, I'm very happy and excited to interview Professor Stanton and to understand how his personal life and his research interact together and create these unique expertise. I will start with a very personal question, and then slowly we'll get into the connection between academic, scholarly work and personal influences on your academic work. But let's
Great.
start from something very straightforward. So, when do you feel the happiest? When do you think you can reach the highest level of happiness in your life?
Huh. So I think interestingly enough, that brings me back to my research, right? I think about stress as being sort of a time when you are not happy, when you're
Hmm.
not at ease, and that can lead us to act in certain ways that are not the healthiest for us. And that's
Hmm.
a lot of what I do my research on. On the other hand, when you're free of stress and you are at peace and your mind is at ease, you sort of just you can even feel in your brain just the muscles opening and relaxing,
Hmm.
and that is just I think of that as the physical experience of when I'm the happiest, and that tends to happen when I'm in nature,
Hmm.
traveling, when I'm speaking different languages, when I'm connecting with people, um, when I'm learning something new.
What do you mean about speaking different languages? Did you learn how to speak different languages to achieve happiness, or did that come? It was a skill of yours, and it turned out to be useful in life?
It's such a bummer that I don't speak Italian because I'm
Uh,
maybe Professor Ferrello, you can help me in the future here,
why
but
not?
because I would love to speak Italian, but I I think it goes back to connecting with people, and that is so important to me. And so when I speak different languages, it allows me to connect with so many more people.
Mm-hmm.
And not only that, but the way that we use words differently in different languages is just blows my mind. And it I think it sort of makes me realize and empathize with other people, about how they perceive the world, and it helps me perceive the world through their eyes, and that makes me happy.
I saw there's a word in your research that comes up pretty often, which is behavioral. Right. Can you tell us what is behavioral therapy? If this adjective behavioral has to do with your passion of observing people, of connecting with people, is there any bridge? Is there any link with it?
So my field, I'm a clinical health psychologist, licensed clinical health psychologist. And so I went to school to look at psychology, which is the mind, but then also I study medicine, which is the body. And my research and my training has to do with how are the mind and the body connected?
Mhm.
How do things that happen in our mind, how are they manifested in our behaviors, and how are behaviors that we have that, like, say, sitting home all day, or the opposite, going for a run, eating well, right? Eating very healthy foods versus eating really unhealthy foods, fatty, kind of, unhealthy but tasty foods. And how do behaviors like that affect our mind? And so that's sort of what the crux of my study and my PhD. Actually, it's interesting. I'm a clinical psychologist, right? But my advisor for my PhD is actually a medical doctor who's not a psychiatrist. He's a medical doctor. So my training is really just exactly half and half: medicine and psychology, mind and body.
Mhm. And your focus is on addiction, on food in particular. Why did you get there? Is there a personal connection in your past, in your family, that led you to this particular topic in academia?
I guess so. I guess I would go back to the Harvard Medical School Division on Addiction, where I worked right after I graduated from undergrad. And I think I noticed when I was there that we were studying addictions, both predominantly alcoholism and gambling addiction, which is a behavioral addiction. And time again, it came up that we were constantly talking sometimes about the mind and about how the mind was affecting um, people's addictions, and then other times how it was the substance itself. Heroin is so addictive that people can't, supposedly, you know um, resist. Well, what got me fascinated and what we kind of became more and more interested in were these behavioral addictions. um, Behavioral addictions like gambling, or like, eating too much food, say. And it's interesting because these behaviors actually share a lot of similarities with addictions like heroin or cocaine addiction, or cigarette addiction that we're very familiar with, that has a drug. And but with behavioral addictions like gambling and obesity, there really isn't a drug in the same way, right? But people are
Mhm.
still showing the same signs. Like there's withdrawal, meaning they have symptoms when they don't get the same amount of um, satisfaction from whatever they're doing. There's also tolerance, where they kind of have to keep taking gambling more and more and more to get that same high. And so that became fascinating to me. And I thought that what was interesting was that people weren't really looking at eating as much as they were at cocaine and drugs, and other types of hard drugs. And so and the thing about eating is that we all eat, right? We have to eat in order to survive. And so it's kind of a unique type of addiction where we have to eat, but then at the same time, um, sometimes people use it as a coping technique to cope with stress.
Mhm.
And so that's sort of what got me interested in eating addiction. But then also, it kind of can show you how it also got me interested in stress as a predictor of that addictive behavior.
Is there anything personal? Is there any friend in your life, or just
Yeah,
a
that's right.
family member that went through something like that and motivated you to choose this addiction rather than others?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you mentioned that. So I do have, there are members of my family who, have had bariatric surgery, which is a type of weight loss surgery where they
Mm.
um, surgically remove part of your stomach
Oh,
because
wow.
you're so obese that it's affecting your health. And then afterwards, I used to work in a bariatric surgery clinic. I was actually part of the team that treated and decided whether someone was a good candidate for bariatric surgery. And so, both looking at my family members who went through this and who struggle with this, addictive eating, and my patients, it I've gotten quite a personal experience looking at this issue.
And you think in having gone through that is more behavioral than physical. So what do you mean by that?
So I wouldn't say it's more behavioral than
Ah,
physical.
okay.
No, well, I mean that, but I mean, I it's complicated basically, and that's why I think it's so interesting to study, is that there's some evidence that um, again, just to go back to what I think is at the what interests me about the root of the cause of it is that stress seems to do strange things to people's behaviors, right?
Mm.
When people are stressed out, they will do irrational things. There's a great episode of Hidden Brain. Have you ever heard of that podcast? On
No.
Okay, you'd love it actually.
Uh-huh. All right. I will check it out.
It's all about psychology and philosophy and society.
Ah,
Um,
uh-huh.
and he talks about the case of a woman who, when she was stressed out and you know didn't have any money, how she got a credit card and ended up buying like a whole grocery cart full of toilet paper, even though she didn't really have enough, necessarily like food in her house, or clothes. And it was strange because it's sort of an irrational reaction to sort of, well, actually, hey, oh, there you are. You kind of disappeared for a second.
I know.
You would seem like it sort of seems like an irrational reaction, but that's sort of what stress does to us. It makes us act in certain ways that seem irrational, but for her, you know maybe she just forgot, she was focused on how she didn't have enough toilet paper, and she just, now that she had a credit card, she finally had the amount of money that she could, that to buy toilet paper, and so she wanted as much of it as possible so that she wouldn't run out again. And that's sort of part of one of the things that happens to people who are stressed, is that they act in ways that oftentimes cause them more problems down the line. And so um, it's been very interesting for me to just study stress and its effect on behavior, including like the addiction to food. Um, and I also, so that's one line of research, is looking at stress and how it contributes to obesity. And then the other line of research is how stress around COVID and in the
Mm.
time we're living in contributes to unhealthy behaviors like not eating as well, lack
Mhm.
of exercise, drinking too much alcohol, smoking too much, etc.
Do you think, I know that you are a licensed hypnotherapist also. Uh, Do you think that can help, that hypnosis in general can help with addiction behaviors, reducing stress?
So that's an interesting connection. You asked me what makes me the happiest, and I was saying it's just that
Ah,
thing of ease, right? That kind of peace, and that
right.
is exactly what we do when we're working on hypnosis. Hypnosis, I think it has this aura that it's some sort of magic, but
Right.
really what it is just making people relaxed and happy so that they are more open to changes in their mindset and changes in their behavior. And so, you know, that is, hypnosis is can be very useful for addictions in particular. Um, and I do have a personal story with that too. That's sort of how I got into hypnosis.
Please tell us.
Yeah, my grandmother actually was addicted to cigarettes, and when I was a kid, my parents would say, make sure you throw away Graham's cigarettes. You don't want her to be smoking, and so I would throw her cigarettes away. That didn't seem to help. My grandmother's parent children, like my
Mhm.
parents, my mom would say, you can't do that, mom. You can't smoke. This is not good for your health. Um, and that didn't seem to help. So none of that helped. And what did help, which was wild to me, is that she went to see a hypnotherapist, and the hypnotherapist, she had like 2 sessions with this
Oh,
hypnotherapist, and she was cured forever for the rest of her life after smoking for 70 years.
wow.
So that sort of seemed amazing to me, and I that sort of got me interested in learning about hypnosis.
Is it affordable?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, compared to taking medication or the effects of addiction, yeah, for sure.
Okay, thank you. I mm, I would like to move to another personal question, and let's see how it will develop in. Yeah, it will connect with your academic research, your life. You seem to have a very interesting background, so I will dig as much as I can into that.
Oh, thanks.
So, have you ever been in a place in which you questioned everything about yourself? And if so, how did you get out of there? Because, I mean, we need sometimes to be there, sometimes out. Tell me a little.
Yeah, I mean, I guess since we were talking about languages,
Mm,
something that comes to mind is traveling. And when you're in a different country and you don't speak the language and you don't know the culture, that really has forced me to think, you know, think about myself and who I am and all the things that I've built up as important, um, maybe they aren't so important in another context. So I used to live in Senegal in West
mm,
Africa,
wow.
and I lived there for over a year, almost 2 years, and it was incredible because things that matter here don't matter there, and vice versa. So I think one of the, one, I guess one incident that comes to mind is I was at a concert, outdoor concert, and I didn't notice, but my phone got stolen. And um, it wasn't even, it wasn't like the fanciest phone, but it was a nice, nice phone. And I was crushed. You know,
Yeah.
I assumed that when I talked to my Senegalese friends about it, that they would feel the same way. So I said, "Oh, I'm so sad. I lost this phone. I was at this concert. Can you believe it? Can you believe I lost my phone?" And they looked at me and they said, "Mike, do you still have your family?" I said, "You
Yeah.
still have yourself and your health?" And I said, "Yes."
Hmm. Hmm.
Then you're not missing anything.
Right.
And that just made me realize why, why am I valuing this stupid phone, right? And we sort of, I would say in the West, we tend to do that. We value objects a lot more. And whereas in Senegal,
Hmm.
it's not the case. People are much more important. Why would you even think about
Of course.
technology?
So questioning yourself in this case was the right thing to do. It was gaining meaning for your life.
Yes, very.
Mhm. Right. Can I ask you why Senegal for 1 year? I mean, you live in California. I mean, yeah, we teach in California, so I know that it's a big jump, Senegal.
So I lived there twice in my life. Sorry about the
Ah,
the background.
no problem.
um, I lived there twice actually, once in
Mhm.
college and then once after college. And
Mm,
yeah, for about a year and a half. So Senegal because I spoke French, but I
mhm,
want to live in France. Um, I mean, I love France, but I had already been there, and I wanted something that was going to challenge me more.
mhm.
So yeah. So and also yeah, just learning more about the African continent and West Africa just was really interesting to me. So
And I think it helps also as a professor here. I mean, I know that we have many students who are directly from other continents, and they might feel in the same way as you were describing before, right? Meaning, okay, what counts for me every day doesn't count here, and vice versa. The system of values I was used to is completely different. The language I
yeah,
feel always ridiculous when I speak because the sound is strange.
yeah. Yeah, and so yeah, that's such a good point. It's funny. I don't think about that enough. The fact that our students are definitely experiencing that all the time, and even when they've been here for generations, they still have grandparents in their house or parents who don't speak the language. Um, yeah, for sure, and I'm sure that's a really tough experience where they're constantly thinking about
Mm,
themselves in a different context.
yeah, Japanese students, I can imagine for people that the linguistic gap is is certainly huge. How do you think people view you? And how do you view yourself instead?
I think it's tough to so that's a tough question because I think that if you get too tied up in what people view of you, you won't be able to effectively be yourself.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I
Mhm.
think, I mean, to a certain extent, you need to see, think about how other people are viewing you, because you obviously don't want to make a big faux pas. You don't want to make a big mistake in your, in the way you're in your department or your culture. But if you think too hard about that, then you're not being authentic, right? I don't know. This is a great question for a
Excellent.
philosopher like yourself.
Exactly. Yeah, that's why we're here.
What is
Yeah.
authenticity? And
What do you think being authentic means? Mm, what is authenticity for you? Being your authentic Mike.
I think the older I get, the more I think that being authentic requires you to, you know, be to not think too hard about, like you said, what other people are thinking or about what you're, I don't know, trying to create or affect. It, I read an interesting book called The Art of Is,
Mm,
and
mhm,
it's about improvisation and about how, we can learn um, so much about the authentic experience from improvisation in art, improvisation in music, improvisation in life. Um,
mhm.
and so that just made me think a lot. And so I do. I think authentic being requires us to be in that state where we're not thinking too much and we're sort of just being.
Mhm, mhm. Improvising is being authentic. And so, when you write, when you reflect, when you study, are you authentic? Because this implies a reflection.
I think that I don't always follow my advice. I mean, I'm a psychologist, right? So I'm constantly trying to help other people.
Mhm.
A teacher, right? I'm sure you are too. And but I think sometimes it's tough for us. We do need to give ourselves time to be ourselves. And I think sometimes we're so busy that we don't always give ourselves that space.
Is there research you did, something you wrote, a talk you gave in which you felt, ah, this is my authentic self. I feel so much myself in doing this.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think the nature of science is kind of weird because at least
Yeah.
the kind of, the research I do, it's very there's not a whole lot of me in the work. And actually if you put yourself in the work, then it's considered not
Mm.
right? There's
Uh-huh. Yeah.
objectivity, subjectivity piece.
Mm-hmm.
And, think of Thomas Kuhn and, his treatment of all that. But at the same time, I think that's why I enjoy that research, but really I needed to balance that with teaching. And I also need to balance that with other types of written work. So in the last couple of, last year even, I've done a bunch of commentaries, and
Mm-hmm.
that's a lot more authentic for me.
What is a commentary?
Huh?
And who is Thomas Kuhn for our audience? Tell us a
Oh,
little bit more.
I
Yeah.
feel like you need to tell. I'm not the philosopher here. Only one of us is a philosopher.
I mean, for Thomas Kuhn, we were referring to the shift of paradigm of science, I guess. So
Mhm.
how we consider science differently according to the surrounding the development of our culture, of our education. So the meaning of science changes in its systematic way with us changing. And how does this interconnect with your work on commentaries? Why this working on commentaries felt real?
Well, so it's interesting. I guess, in the briefest sort of way, that I feel like the scientific work I do tries, in a way, pretends like it is more objective, right? And I'm
Mhm,
encouraged to perform in a way that's very objective so that it's taken seriously.
mhm,
In a commentary, I get to be more of my authentic self and talk about what's important to me. So, for example, when you asked I think you had asked me for an article that represented myself.
Exactly.
Sent
Yeah.
you a commentary, right, that I recently did. And it was on how we can confront anti-Black racism within biomedical research that I do. So.
Can you tell me a little about that article? I was about to ask you on that article and ask you if you felt authentic in expressing your ideas there. And here you go, you cited it. So.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say that in that article we talk about how, I was talking to you earlier about stress and about how stress um, makes us act in certain ways that negatively affect our behavior, right? Make us unhealthy in a lot of ways. And I think that as a field, we too often are criticizing those people, right, who are acting in ways that make themselves unhealthy, without understanding the larger system of stress that makes them, or leads them to act unhealthy. And so this commentary talks about that larger system and about what we can do as a field to really reframe some of the the research we do on stress and obesity and every and many other topics. So just anti-Black racism in general, because unfortunately, African Americans tend to be the to bear the brunt of a lot of the in the United States, right? Political problems, policy issues, nutrition, you name it. And so anyway, in this article, I talked about the fact that when we create, so a lot of what my field does is we create interventions to fix a lot of these, or to help people improve their health. We don't often we don't take a step back and look at the larger structure that has caused the inequalities to exist in the first place. Oftentimes, we'll say, oh, this person didn't follow the intervention, and it's their fault as a participant because they didn't follow the intervention.
Mm-hmm.
Really, why didn't they follow the intervention? Maybe you told them to buy fruits and vegetables, but fruits and vegetables aren't available in their neighborhood. Maybe you told them to go exercise by running around their neighborhood, but their neighborhood isn't safe.
Mm-hmm.
So you tell them to go to parks, but there's no parks in their neighborhood. So it's like you have to really think about the larger structure. And that's sort of the crux of it.
And behavioral medicine um, is an area in which you work and is especially focused on that, right?
Yeah, so behavioral medicine is about how do you change behaviors, or how does physical health change your behaviors? So yeah, so how do you change your behavior to improve your health, or how does your health affect your behavior? That's what
Mhm.
behavioral medicine is involved.
Thanks for working on that. Certainly, we need somebody who thinks about it and improves the quality of life, not
Oh,
just
yeah, well, we're all doing our part, I think.
right. Look, if I can ask, I mean, I thank you even more because I hear your son crying in the back, and it must be difficult, to do your job and be a father, be there. I thank you for taking the time to do this interview. How is your personal life? The big changes in your life influences the curiosity, the interests that you develop in life. Do you have the freedom to change a target, to go in the direction of your curiosity, to make your life a part of your research? Or is research something that keeps you away from your life?
I think that things have really changed since
Uh,
having a baby, and so before you sort of um, I think a lot more you live to work, and then after you have a child, I think you work to live a little more, where
yeah.
you're, thinking about how can whatever I'm doing provide for my child, or you kind of have to change your priorities a little bit. Um,
Mhm.
but but that being said, I still really enjoy what I do, and I'm lucky that I've chosen something that I'm passionate about, and that is something that I'm excited to do when I get up in the morning. And but yeah, I mean, for sure, you can't deny that priorities change when you have
Mhm.
when you have a child.
You're not going to move toward food expertise in children, for example, like, after you don't have
No,
children.
I so strangely enough, like
Uh-huh.
yeah, pediatric medicine
Mm,
is not my specialty, and I'm
uh-huh.
okay with that.
You're not going to get there. All right. Thank you so much, Michael. Who is the philosopher who inspired you more and why?
Well, it depends how you define philosophy.
Right.
um, I know, I mean, we all have a degree in philosophy, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
The PhD. Yes.
Yeah, exactly, PhD. I mean, it depends. I think if you're thinking of, just pure, you know, philosophy, I guess I always thought Thomas Kuhn was really fascinating in a lot of ways. I brought him up already. I think, the part of his ideas that I like are, and no one's perfect, so I know there are a lot of criticism as well, but I think that there are a few things I like. One is that the idea about revolutions in science and about how, um, particularly the part he talks about how it's often an outsider that comes into a new field, and it's usually the outsider that changes the field. You think of Einstein. He was in a patent office. He was just a guy working on, patents. He was just a paper pusher in a government,
Mhm.
and then he became the most famous physicist. And it almost, I feel like it almost had to be an outsider in that respect. So I think that's true about so many of our fields, and I think it's really underappreciated because we try, especially, I mean, at least in my field, I should say, there's so much pressure to just toe the line and to just check all the boxes as someone who's a good, researcher in our field. And when, ironically, it's the people who come from out of the field and who challenge our paradigms that are the ones that make history. Um,
Thank you.
and that's true for, across fields, right? There's that bumper sticker that they say, like, polite women never make the history, aren't the ones who make the history books.
I
It's
don't
true,
know.
right? I mean, you it's a great quote. People have to be different and have to really challenge things, and I think we need to appreciate that as a society.
Does this appreciation have to do with the word diversity? That was my next question. Is it a neutral word for you? What does it mean to you?
Diversity. I mean, I think diversity is it's loaded in our culture. So I don't know. It's diversity to me sounds a little it sounds a little like demeaning, I think, because it
Mm,
almost sounds like you're going to a buffet and you have like a little bit from each tray at a buffet.
mm,
Don't even necessarily like each food. You're doing it because you feel like that's what you're supposed to do. Or I don't know. Diversity doesn't feel authentic. Just to go back to what the word we were talking about, I
mhm.
think in some ways it maybe motivates good behavior. So I don't want to completely demean it, because often it has led to good. It's people who create who use it often have good intentions, and so I don't want to undermine that. But and we do need more representation of women in CEO among CEOs, among African Americans and Latinos in academia, and in positions of power in general. But I guess it's more than just diversity. It's inclusion too, right? And it's representation. And it's not just for the sake of diversity. It's because it matters.
Thank you, Mike. We are at the end of this interview, and I have just one last question, of course, which is a few words from you about the meaning of life. So, what's the meaning of life for you? It's a very easy, simple question.
Simple. All right. Yeah. The
That gives
meaning
the
of
title
life.
to the podcast.
Wow. Oh, that's a good one. Well, I mean, I am a psychologist at heart, and when I think of meaning of life, I think of Viktor Frankl's really
Mhm.
um, book that really affected me called Man's Search for Meaning. You know, he's a gentleman who lived through the Nazi death camps, and he somehow survived. Unbelievably, through the concentration camps during World War II in Nazi Germany, and he was a psychiatrist and wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning that talks about what is what was the secret sauce, the secret element that got the people through Nazi Germany and through all the hardships. And he talked about that there are three things that it can be: your relationship to others, some social. It can be so in other words, living to, reunite with your wife or your husband, or your child. You can live for a work of art, like, or a work of that you're, a research project or something that you're passionate about that you need to complete, that's your passion. Or it could just be like living honorably. And I do think about that. I think about those three things when you say meaning of life.
What do you think he means by living honorably?
Well, his example is people sometimes look at, Jesus Christ in Christianity, or Muhammad in Islam, or the Buddha in Buddhism, and they're the reason that we venerate them is because they like lived or died honorably. So Jesus, right, he died honorably on the cross. um he didn't like try to fight people and like use his power to, he sort of died honorably. And so that's what Viktor Frankl means when he says live honorably or die honorably.
Thank you so much for bringing up Viktor Frankl. I think he's a cornerstone for this podcast. Yeah.
Nice.
Thank you so much for your willingness to join the podcast and for your interview, Mike. It was a pleasure to talk to you today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I had a really great time.